Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kelsey, and let's go through some arcs again. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know that as I have many books on my physical TBR, I also have books on my NetGalley TBR. We won't even talk about the rest of my Kindle TBR. I just love to be stir crazy on NetGalley, requesting everything that I want. And then when I get everything that I want, I'm like, what happened? Why do I have all these books to read? And more often than I would like to admit, sometimes we are behind on release schedules. So in order to combat that and be in the good graces of the NetGalley gods, we need to film these videos to push myself to read some of the arcs. So without further ado, let's get into the arcs I need to read for this video. The first arc I will be getting to is George Falls Through Time by Ryan Collette. This is a story of a man named George who falls through time into the 1300s and his adventures from there. The next book I read was Dollface by Lindy Ryan. This follows a horror writer named Jill as she moves into a new county in New Jersey, and soon these murders start happening around her. And the last book I read was Japanese Gothic by Kylie Lee Baker. Kylie Baker is a anticipated writer for me, so I always try to get an arc of her books, and I always buy a new release copy. This follows more essentially a house and two characters in different timelines who live in this house. One is named Lee Turner. He has hid away in Tokyo at his father's new recently purchased house because he has mysteriously murdered his roommate and he doesn't really remember doing so. And the second timeline follows Sen, who is the daughter of a disgraced samurai in 1877, also living in said same house. I just realized something symbolic about Japanese Gothic. Anyways, I will take you back to Kelsey 1 week ago and we'll come back at the end. Hello, so I just finished editing my vlog that you will see posted for this one on Classic Sci-Fi. And after such a successful week, I really wanted to get the success going and finish some arcs with you guys. So the first arc that I am currently reading, and I am 100 pages into, or at least maybe not 100 pages, but the first third definitely, and that is for George Falls Through Time by Ryan Collette. This is a January release, so you can definitely say I am behind, as it is in fact May, but this one immediately appealed to me for its synopsis and the really cool cover. I love the color. I love this idea of George falling through the O of his name. I just think sometimes cover art really does a big deal in making you interested in a book. So George has been newly laid off and the internet bill is in his ex-boyfriend's name. He's got a spider-infested apartment and 2 of the 6 dogs he's walking in London have just escaped. It's pure undiluted stress that sends him into a spiral all the way to the year 1300. When he comes to, George recognizes the same rolling hills as Greenwich Park, but the luxuries and phone service of modernity are nowhere to be found. So where we are currently in the first third, basically George falls through time. He gets to the year 1300. He learns to understand the guards and the way that Old English is spoken through being captured in a prison and being spoken to by prison guards. They believe him to be some sort of Danish soldier who's been sent there to infiltrate. They expected them to have magic or have more advancements in their warring tactics than the British. I don't know exactly the historical war tactics that were going on over there. Basically, they think George is a Danish. And Simon believes that he is not Danish. He is, in fact, from the future. I realized I never spoke about who Simon was, but basically, Simon is one of the prison guards that watched over George and is meant to watch over George. And they end up having this connection that's kind of explained, and Simon helps him escape from the prison, and so now they're on this journey together. He finds George's telephone and he doesn't understand what it is. He understands that it's a piece of glass that lights up, and obviously this is insane technology to a medieval person. It's kind of like making a Victorian child try a Diet Pepsi. The concept of that is so insane, but for some reason Simon doesn't think anything more than that. Right now, he has tried to help him escape the prison that he's in. So that's where I am so far in the synopsis. The one thing I do want to make a complaint about now is that I find George to be fucking sufferable. He's so negative. He basically, like the synopsis says, spiraled himself into the past. I'm trying to be empathetic because I think if I spiraled myself, I was having a panic attack that sent me to the medieval ages, I would be like, what the fuck is going on? Just kill me. So I get the dramaticism that he has, but it's really making me reflect on my attitude because it's like, oh my god, I can't even read this shit. He's so frustrating. I do sense a upcoming romance, I guess, between Simon and George. If it does happen, I do think the start of their romance has been a bit quick. I do find it very brave for George to like indulge in this romance when it does happen, and I'm expecting it to happen. Am I enjoying it? Like, not as much as I enjoyed my books from last week. And maybe that's the case. I had such a successful week last week with classic sci-fi that this like medieval romantic fantasy is not pulling me in the best. I'm trying to keep an open mind. I do want to finish this ASAP. I know I'm not going to finish it tonight, but I want to get at least another third in it before I go to bed. Hello. Unfortunately, my microphone just stopped working randomly. There is no voice recording for this clip at all on my phone or my computer. Love that, slay. But I figured I might as well just give a little mid-book update here, although I don't remember exactly my thoughts on this. What I do remember about the middle of the book is that I found it to be pretty similar to my feelings in the first third. So again, I don't think George improved as a character at all. I still found him to be very, very, very insufferable. What I did like about this section was the character Simon. He was very vocal with George on his feelings on how George seems extremely pretentious because George is from the future, right? He sees Simon and the other people in the medieval past to not have as much knowledge as him. He's sort of perpetuating this idea that they are dumb or silly and their beliefs and stuff are prevalent. And obviously Simon does not take that too kindly, so I appreciated that aspect. What I didn't like in this section was really the time jump. So we're placed into Simon and George's relationship like 1 to 2 years in the future of like where we last left them in the last third, and they are acting really like a married couple, which I guess they sort of are because they are a couple, they are a relationship, but I found their little quips and banters to not be charming at all. I found it to be quite annoying because George is acting like a pretentious asshole. We did have some revelations on like the sort of magic system in the second third of the book that explain the role of like dragons sort of in the medieval ages and how the dragons have something to do with why George has gone back in time. And that's where I think I'll leave you because I don't really think my feelings for the novel or like my enjoyment for the novel really changed from the first third to the end of the book. So we'll just jump into my final thoughts. Hello, it's time to give a final update for George Falls Through Time by Ryan Collette. It is currently Mother's Day, so happy Mother's Day to all my fellow moms, wannabe moms, people who've lost a mom, people who want to have kids, people who don't want to have kids. Happy day. Happy day. I celebrated it by walking around some neighborhoods in my city, going to different coffee shops, going to try new foods, walking around just with my son and my partner, which was the ideal day for me. And today I just had some sushi and I finished George Falls Through Time. So I find this one to be a really, really hard one to rate because genuinely, like, if I had more hype for it, I think I would be disappointed because I'm feeling slightly disappointed. Also, if you hear Tupperware's banging and stuff in the background, my son is playing with the Tupperware drawer, which is his favorite new pastime right now. Like I was saying, I was really disappointed because I really, really liked the cover and I really, really liked the premise of this book. But immediately upon chapter 1, and I think I said it in the first clip of this book, I hated our main character. The novel is interspersed between these moments in medieval England and within George's, I guess, past life, because his current life is in medieval England. But the past life moments are insufferable to read from. He was so miserable. He was a person that had such a negative outlook on life. Like, he only saw the bad in any of the scenarios and examples that he gave to us, and he put himself also in miserable scenarios so that he could do a pity party and complain about them. And he's so negative about his life that this is what ultimately sends him back to medieval England. This is what causes him to time travel. And did that make sense to you? Because it certainly did not make sense to me. And I'm just finishing the novel and I still don't think it makes sense to me. And as George finds himself in the 1300s, he's immediately able to fit into medieval English society culture with zero culture shock. Like, they do think he's this like spy for the Danish or a magician or whatever, but like there's no real actual problems. And he also quickly learns medieval English like within a week that he's there in prison. People are barely talking to him, and he's fluent after. And on top of all of that, he falls in love with this character named Simon, and I just didn't believe their romance. I feel like they fell in love way too quickly. They were just so devoted to one another for almost no apparent reason. Like, that made less sense to me than the dragons flying around. Unfortunately, I had to give this book 2 stars. And I hate saying that. I hate saying that about ARCs because I want to love advanced reader copies, especially when the premise sounds so good and the cover looks so good. And I really, really think I'm going to enjoy it. But alas, George was just too insufferable for me. So the next book that I'm going to read, I barely started. I'm like within the first chapter, is Dollface by Lindy Ryan. Horror author Jill has just moved to suburban New Jersey, hoping to fit in with the new PTA moms and maybe not weird everyone out with her final girl coffee mug. But then a plastic face masked serial killer begins slashing their way through town, one mom at a time. The police are incredulous, the moms are indignant, and Jill is slowly wrapped into a killer's murderous spree until she might just be the last woman standing. I hope I really like this. I tend to really like slashers both in movie form and in book form. I think a slasher is really, really going to work for me. And I love the idea of Barbie meets Scream. Scream is my favorite film franchise. I love Scream. So to have that mixed with this like girly popification of like Barbie, I think could be really, really fun. So I'm going to continue listening to it. Like I said, I'm only in chapter 1, so I have no real coherent thoughts right now, but I'll definitely update you later tonight. Hello, welcome to the next day. I did in fact get 30% or 1/3 of the, well, I guess 1/3 is technically 3.33333. I did get 30% of the way through Doll House last night. Nothing of real substance has totally happened. We're very much getting like the setup of what will inevitably be, I guess, all the people who are killed and our killer, who we don't know, obviously. But we have our main character, who I honestly forgot her name, Jill. So Jill has just recently moved to New Jersey. She's a horror writer and she's sort of in a slump right now. She doesn't know what her next horror book is going to be because her first book was like a sensation, it seems. And she moves in next to this girl named Deborah, who is one of those like PTA moms that's like, welcome to the neighborhood. Here's this, here's that. And she makes her a whole package of like a welcome package full of things that she is currently selling. So it's reminding me a lot of like when my mom did Avon, invited everybody over, and it's like, if you want mascara, make sure to buy it from me, make sure to buy it from Avon. That's what it's reminding me of. And the brand is, of course, Dollface. Deborah invites Jill to go for a like brunch with the other PTA moms because she's like, well, if your son is joining our school, like you might as well join the PTA. And because you're a horror writer, maybe you could help us with like the Halloween activities that we're going to have. And so she goes to this brunch, and obviously she's realizing like the other people are really mean to her new friend Deborah, and the other moms are just like, I don't know, catty PTA moms. And this is not something that Jill is accustomed to, but is understanding that this is sort of her new reality. So Deborah goes over to Jill's house to do her makeup, to test out some products, and Jill is the only one that seems to be very extremely nice to Deborah. The other moms seem very, very mean to her. That's where we're at right now. I see by the abysmal Goodreads rating that this is not the most well-liked book. So I have a feeling that it's going to be either extremely predictable and maybe Deborah is the slasher slash killer, or it's a terrible ending, doesn't make sense. And so that's why people don't like it. We'll see which one it is. So far, I have no like real opinions because, like I said, we're just very much in the setup. I'm going to continue listening it today if I have time because I'm in the midst of like report writing, and I'll get back to you. Hello. I did just get, as I'm like working today, 2/3 of the way through Dollface by Lindy Ryan. Right off the bat, I just want to say something. Our main character, Jill, is a horror author, and she's supposed to be a horror fanatic. And she knows so much about horror. She's always bringing up like, actually, this happened in blah 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 blah. And then if there's one thing I know, is Scream. Okay, and this is a book supposed to be comped for Scream. This is such a side note tangent, but like it really pissed me off. She's talking to her husband. She's like, yeah. Here's the serial killer lord. Da. And for some reason, I can only imagine Billy Loomis. And who was his partner? I'm sorry, 2 seconds. Do I love Matthew Lillard? Yes. But you can't tell me that you're a horror fanatic. You like horror so much that you write horror yourself. You know all the intricacies about the political dynamics in some of these horror movies that she's talking about. Okay? And you don't know Stu Macher? I find that very strange. I find that very weird. And I feel like it just made me not like Jill as a main character. And quite frankly, how can I even trust her? I feel like it's such a stupid, like, her, like, Lindy Ryan's editors, like, I don't understand. Nobody was like, this is a weird thing to say. It came after a whole monologue of them talking about Halloween and how serial killers sometimes end up being women. And that's like a cool twist because women are not often thought to be serial killers, which we'll get on that point. I feel like that was a really obvious, like, hello. So we have this whole dynamic. Then she's also talking at a later point about the Candyman and how that was a discussion on like racial dynamics and blah, blah, blah. All valid points, all valid points. And I think if you can look at horror in that way to start looking at the socio-political dynamics within the horror genre, you would kind of know one of the most iconic slasher villains. Am I wrong? If I know enough by cultural osmosis about Halloween, about Texas Chainsaw Massacre that I've never watched, if I know enough about them, surely a horror fanatic would know who Billy Loomis's partner is in Scream. Anyways, that is to say, I think there is a lot of writing issues that I have within this book, clearly. Another one is this very obvious nod, I think, to like sway us being like, oh, a woman could be the one who did it. And it could go either way for me, right? That could be like a red herring. I'm meant to think it's a woman. Jill definitely thinks it's a woman. In fact, she thinks it's one specific woman who is the person who used to own their house, Patty. I think it's Darla. And I think I called her Deborah in the last clip, but her name is Darla. And I very much think it's her. If it's not her, then I was led to believe this due to the red herring. And if it's not her, I think it's Jill's husband. It's one of them. I'm like 1,000% sure. Third choice, it's the cop's wife, Rosa. One of those three. It's one of them. I actually think the slashings, the killings are pretty cool. And I think they're really horrifically described. And I like that. I think Lindy Ryan has a really great way at horrifically describing the horrific elements, the slashings that have occurred. We just listened to one character's death that involved scooping their eye out with an ice cream scooper. And I found that to be disgusting to listen to. And I think that that's really, really, really well done. So Lindy Ryan, you have something here with horror descriptions. You've got it. The mystery, something needs to happen that like completely shocks me but makes sense, and maybe I'll enjoy the rest of the book. I think if I was watching this as a movie, it could be like really fun. Would I think anything like crazy about it? No. I don't know exactly if there's going to be this socio-political aspect to it, given that Lindy Ryan is talking about it so much. I would like to hope so, but I feel like her credibility was sort of lost to me. I'm telling you guys, like, it was such a one-off line that completely threw me off for the rest of. I was like, I can't even trust Jill as a character. I can't even trust her as a writer. I can't trust her. Why do I have to care about this horror writer who doesn't know one of the. I'm sorry, I find this ridiculous. Other than that, I have to say it's pretty quick to listen to. I definitely think I'm going to get this done within the next hour or so. So that's exciting. At least I am able to finish this book pretty quickly. It's going fast. I'm finding myself like pretty engaged. There's no moments where I'm really confused in terms of like timeline and plot. Character choices, yes. Timeline and plot, I'm following along pretty well. I'm going to get into the last third. I really do want to know who the killer is. I really want to know the final like climax of the novel. So I'm going to continue listening to this. Hopefully I come back with positive thoughts, but we'll see.
Me listening to this balls to the walls reveal.
Hello. So last night I did manage to finish Dollface by Lindy Ryan. Hold on, I have nothing prepared. I just put the camera on and rolled with it. Yes, Lindy Ryan. So as I mentioned when I introduced this book, it was comped as a mix of like Scream and Barbie, but it is as much related to Scream as it is just involving consecutive kills by a serial killer dying in a very short and gruesome manner. That's it. That's all they have in relation to one another. I went into this thinking, because of that comp, that I was going to get something fun or campy. And really, I just got 300 pages of my eyes rolling. I think the hardest part about this book was that Jill was a main character that was so incredibly difficult to follow. As I mentioned in the last clip, this bothered me so much. Like, she is a supposed horror fan and a horror author. So you would imagine she would be connected to like the tropes and like typical like horror knowledge. And in the very book that comps itself to being related to Scream, she can't remember Stu Macher's name. I find, I'm sorry guys, sorry to bring it up again, I find that ridiculous. And I don't think I mentioned this in the last clip, but it is something that also really, really, really bothered me about this book. But she is having so much sex with her darling husband, the most amazing sex ever, literally every 20 pages, that eventually I was starting to question his motives. Like, why are you distracting her at every turn? Get off her, because she's not realizing that the killer is the most obvious person ever. Maybe this says something about me, but I was like, why the fuck is he being so suspicious? Why is he always trying to have sex with her? She's like, oh, I noticed someone in the window and her husband was having sex with her. And I was like, is he involved in some fucking way? So there's two twists in the book. The first twist I don't think was shocking. And then the second twist is a random killer who literally comes out of nowhere, I feel like. There was nothing to build up the fact that this person could also be a killer in the book. If that's a spoiler, I'm sorry, but I don't even think you can figure it out because no clues were laid. I think the best part about this book is how gory and descriptive the killings are, as I mentioned in the last clip. And I guess that's very indicative to how I was feeling, that the best part about these books were people getting killed, the characters getting killed. I'm being really generous by giving it a 2 stars because I think it's really obvious by those descriptive slasher scenes that Lindy Ryan can write. But I think in general, overall, this was a very silly mess that did a disservice to Scream and to Barbie. Like, where did the Barbie come in? Because they were girls? I don't know. I found this to be very, very weird. So, after 2 failed ARC attempts, I'm glad I got them off. They were, I think, 2 books I was excited to read. So, it's very, very tragic that they only got 2 stars. I do think that this next book will save the video, and that is Japanese Gothic by Kylie Lee Baker. As you can see, fully published book. So it is not, in fact, an advanced reader copy that I am reading, but for the purpose of this vlog, it's really just to get my NetGalley TBR down. I also got this from Aardvark, so I'm tackling one of my goals for the year, which is to read more of my Aardvark book box selections. So I'm very happy about that. This is a book that follows 2 timelines. So in the first timeline, there's a man who wakes up and he has mysteriously killed his roommate. He doesn't understand how, he doesn't remember where he was last night. So he decides to flee the country in order to move back to his dad's house in Japan to sort of like hide it out until this all blows over. The second timeline is actually in the past, in ancient Japan, I think. Yes, in the 1877. And it follows a young samurai in exile who is hiding from the imperial government in the same home. Calling it Japanese Gothic makes me feel like it's going to be very akin to Gothic literature. Obviously, there is going to be some sort of haunted house, as is very esteemed for Gothic literature. I'm really excited to read this. I'm hoping that I absolutely love it. I tend to like Kylie Lee Baker a lot. I don't think I've read a book from Kylie Lee Baker under 4 stars. If there was a 3.5 somewhere, maybe it was her YA stuff, but I'm really, really liking what she's doing with adult horror. Definitely excited to start that now. I do have some work to do today. I have to finalize a couple of things in like a report I'm writing. How much listening I will get done today is up in the air, but I definitely want to get at least 1/3 done by the end of the workday of this book. So catch you later. Hello. So I'm sorry that we're in the same position. It's just that I am in the midst of report writing and I'm not really moving from my desk. I did go for a walk, so that's a positive. I did also get 1/3 of the way through Japanese Gothic and I'm loving it. First of all, I just really, really, really enjoy Kylie Baker's writing in general. I think her prose is palatable enough that you can jump into any of her works and you feel welcomed into the book. Beautiful in a way that like fully captivates you and makes you like sit there and think about what she is trying to convey within her books. So in general, I just like Kylie Baker's prose overall. In regards to the plot, I think we have a really, really interesting plot here. So as I suspected, obviously the term of Gothic literature is used to have these more like mysterious looks of like a home, and the dynamics within the home is most usually what's involved in a Gothic novel. So I don't want to get too much into spoilers about what is going on because it's actually like a very interesting take on the Gothic novel. But essentially, we have these 2 timelines, and in one timeline, a son has run away from his roommate's death. He presumes that it's him, but he doesn't fully remember what was done. He doesn't even know how it was done, where he hid the body. Nothing. He hides away in his father's home, who is this American man who married a Japanese woman. And so they moved to Japan to be closer to her family. So he's run away to this house away from the murder scene. However, it's been 4 days and there has been no clues about it. He is actively searching because he wants to see if he's going to be caught. Nothing has come about it yet, which leads to like an eerie feeling about this death, obviously, because it's like, did it actually happen? Who knows? And then we have the 1877 timeline where this girl named Sen is being raised by her father to be a samurai, and he has taught her a lot of things about the samurai. The word is sounding so weird to me now. The samurai way of life. And because he went to go fight and all of the samurai died, when he returns, his daughter knows that that is not fully him, because a samurai would have killed themselves in honor. It is a disgrace to return back a losing samurai. Based on everything her father's taught her, and we get glimpses into their relationship and how abusive he sort of is, already we're getting two eerie aspects in both timelines, aside from the fact that both of them are haunting the other's timeline, is what I'll say. At the bottom of the synopsis, which I did not read originally, it says that one of these people is a ghost and one of these stories is a lie, which is really interesting and something I think I'm going to take moving forward into like understanding the dynamics between the two of them, or being more suspicious of their stories. I knew this was going to be a successful book, which is why I saved it to the end of this vlog, but I didn't realize like how successful it's going to be. But I should have known. I just really like Kylie Lee Baker. Something I didn't share before because I didn't notice until, I don't know, I looked at the book, because I was like, I remember something being special about this. Hello? Okay. This is gorge. I'm obsessed. I'm going to continue listening to this. I'm going to continue writing my report. And I will probably have one more update, I would imagine, today, because I don't think I'm going to want to like put my makeup on and film the entire intro and outro. So that will definitely be done tomorrow. Hello. So I did in fact change the location. So I'm on my couch now. It's less because I don't have a lot of work to do and more just to give you guys a visual change. But I am in fact still in front of my two computer screens working on a report. But I did want to talk to you because I got the second third of the way through the book. So I will in fact be finishing this today, I believe. And I wanted to give you like a quick feeling of how I'm feeling so far. So the book has definitely changed a little bit in the last third that made it, I find, less creepy to me. Actually, what this middle part did was really change my total feelings on the book, and now I'm a little confused about how I feel. The first part of the book I felt was really eerie, mysterious. I was really into like the fact that each character is like haunting the other character in their narrative. And now we're moving more towards like something that makes sense in a way. Like, I don't really want to spoil what's happening because I feel like it's very crucial to the plot, the way that Sen and Lee are able to communicate with one another. And we did get some insight into what Lee did to James, his roommate that he killed at the beginning of the book. So I feel like this sort of stilted my feelings overall, but obviously they are subject to change as I still have one more third left. So I could come to you tomorrow really, really liking it. I don't believe, however, unless something super insane happens and everything starts to make sense, I don't believe that it will be a 5 stars, but I could come to you tomorrow completely shocked about this revelation. I just feel like this middle third was a bit more fantastical than like horror-y, and that's not really what I was expecting from the novel. So it's not the fault of the book, but it's definitely like a fault of my expectations that I placed onto the book. I'm going to continue listening to this while I continue to work on the report. I do have a feeling I'll be taking more breaks today because I did not take any breaks from staring at my screen for the last 2 days. And last night I threw up 3 times from a very, very, very intense migraine. And I went to bed at 10 p.m., which is, I don't know if you guys know, but that's very unlike me. I usually go to bed at 1 in the morning. So 10 p.m., wild. Do I feel well rested? Of course. But am I petrified of getting another headache? Yes. So I will definitely be taking more breaks today, maybe just to like walk around, touch some grass, or continuing to stare at my screen and looking at like the squiggly lines under my spelling mistakes for the next 8 hours. Okay, that's it. Bye. Hello. Welcome to the end of the vlog, and let's talk about my final thoughts for Japanese Gothic by Kylie Lee Baker. If you recall in the introduction, I had a little moment of thought process where I realized that both of these main characters are living in their homes of their fathers who are sort of like disgraced beings or not the best fathers. A little bit of daddy issues going on in here, which I can appreciate. But let's get into my final review. So last I saw you, I was talking about how the middle third of the book was really on the downhill for me. And I will say that the last third wild, guys, wild. It really pulled me in. I enjoyed it 10 times more than I enjoyed the middle part. So I'm settling on a 4-star because of that. The first third, though, was such a 5-star read for me. I really wish we stayed in like that eerie atmospheric setting that we were in. And I loved how confusing our two timelines were. And I think the middle third really starts to like clarify the timelines, and I didn't want that. I will say that Lee and Sen were really interesting characters to follow. I found they had engaging plot points that kept me wanting to know what was going on in their different timelines. Lee's narration in particular was much more confusing than Sen's, but I think that was done in a good way, or at least like an interesting way. I liked trying to guess what was real and what wasn't in his timeline. The middle third, like I said, not my favorite part. It really was reading like that movie with Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves, The Lake House. They were communicating with one another in different timelines, and it just felt overall less horror-y than I would have liked. I found myself getting a little tired of their budding relationship, and while it wasn't like romantic or physical, the pseudo-adventure that they were going on felt like really campy, and I just found myself wanting to get back to their separate mysteries. I didn't need them to like work together to solve them physically together. If you read this book, you know what I mean. But like I said, the last third really pulled me back in. The atmosphere returned to that eerie fever dream I was liking, and the true realities of their tales really began to blur. So like the middle part, you're discovering some things, but then it starts to unravel again. I'm a big fan of the final chapters. I've seen some people say that it's a little bit confusing, but I really liked them. I find they really tied the story together, and they still left some things up in the air for readers to interpret, which I think was really well done. Overall, I will always, always, always reach for a Kylie Lee Baker new release. This was no exception. I'm happy I still enjoyed it, but let's summarize all of the arcs I read for this video. Well, none of them are really advanced reader copies, are they? So as a reminder, the first book I read for this vlog was George Falls Through Time by Ryan Collette, which I gave 2 stars. And that didn't end with Dollface by Lindy Ryan, which I also gave 2 stars. Not the most successful start of this vlog, but we came back together. We had a winner with Japanese Gothic by Kylie Lee Baker, which, as you recall, I gave 4 stars. That's it for this video. Please let me know down below if you are also behind on your NetGalley TBR. What is the oldest book on your NetGalley TBR? I would really like to know what is the oldest book on your TBR that you want to get to. Let me know down below in the comments. If you would like to follow my reading journey, I always leave a link down below to my Twitter, Goodreads, and Instagram if you would like to follow me there. And of course, because it is the end of the vlog, please do not forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. It does wonders for my channel. Makes me feel really good. And that's it. I never know how to end these things, so I will see you next time. Okay, bye!